Hello and welcome to the Q&A&Critique number 55 of the Let's Be For Artists edition, season 2. So here we are doing a live stream digital art questions and answers event, and today we have a special guest, JC, who is an upcoming artist who is getting his feet wet with a number of different nodal work, and he's also been establishing his own parallax add-on, which is very cool. So I've known JC for a little while. He has helped me and has been an integral part of my Painterly project. So I'm very honored to have him here today. And we also have a couple of other pieces for later on today where we're going to be looking at art dedicated by Slink, and also a very cool shader setup done by Shmuel. Both of them are not here today because there is another meeting in Arendale's server at the moment during his game jam, which I highly recommend you join, free and open source. And we also have Plebes here, who has been creating some very cool textures and rocks to take a look at. So without much further to do, here we are with JC. How are you, JC?
Good.
Good. All right, let me just make sure your sound volume's okay. So JC, I have a number of questions that we've been preparing, but I wanted to start with the first things first. So tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm JC. I'm in college right now for motion design, but I've used shader nodes for like 7 years now. Most people probably know me through my vector displacement that I did during November 2020. And I also make a product called PLX, which is a parallax shader for Blender, the best one.
Yes, I agree. It's the best.
You can find it out for yourself if you buy it.
Cool. So today we're going to explore that as I stream here, but that's very cool. So tell me more about this November.
Well, November is a challenge where you make anything with nodes, for me, shader nodes, in once a day for all of November. But last year it was twice a day, once every 2 days. I only was able to do 2 days last year, but I tried to put everything I could into pushing vector displacement to its limits. Because people were already jumping on geometry nodes, I gotta preserve the art of vector displacement somehow, right?
Yes. Which is going to be interesting now that Eevee Next is coming out with displacement as well. So maybe people can start using Eevee to do that. So I have one of your pieces that I loaded up here on Twitter. There's a piece of a jet flying through an asteroid. So you're saying you're sticking with your vector displacement and shaders. Are you saying this is 100% shaders?
Yes. Well, other than the pre-rendered background, it is all one sphere with a shader.
Wow. The little jet, the animation, the flames, the asteroids.
It's all one sphere.
That's incredible. Yeah, I was having a look at the node tree down here. It's whoops, in the comments. This is a next level type of work. So I wanted to ask you, so what inspired you to get into nodes? How did your journey inside shader nodes begin? How did you get into the concept of November? What was your beginning?
Well, I started doing Blender because of those cool simulation videos around 2.72, and once I realized that the computer I was using was far too slow to do simulations, I started using shader nodes. I first was really inspired to do shader nodes by the Prism Glass shader, which is no longer available, but it was around $5, but I couldn't spend $5 on the shader, so I tried to make my own over many years and learned how shaders worked through that.
Oh, wow. So I just had to turn down my headphones because my microphone is picking that up. Thanks, Sam. Wow. So that's how you started. So instead of doing simulation, you went directly into nodes to figure it out. So how did
No,
you?
I did do simulation for a bit, starting with the Andrew Price Wrecking Ball tutorial, but I but fluid simulation that took that was 30 seconds long took hours of waiting, and I was too impatient for that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I also noticed that you've also been working with the compositor, also with color ranges and other aspects here.
Yes, I'm slowly getting into color science and compositing and stuff. That was a very ignorant attempt at trying to make a dynamic tone mapper, but after learning more, it's not that good.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a tricky thing to do. All right. So,
I will return and make a better one in the future.
oh, good. Do you? So with that, you've also been working on a number of different products that we wanted to talk with. But I've also had a look at your trajectory. In this case, trajectory, I'm referring to your past and your present. So I noticed that you've had quite a good alliance and work and also development for CG Mafia. So CG Mafia is another professional artist who works in the Blender and Unreal Engine sphere. They're creating a lot of semi-MPR projects or asset packs for the community, which is quite beautiful. But you've had a very large hand in this, correct?
Yes, I've done a few projects for him which have not come out yet.
So are they secret? Or can we know a little bit more?
I would say that most of them are secret, but if you look in his Discord server, you can see I made a tile distributor for lily pads or any texture.
Oh wow, cool.
Here, I'll send the link.
And other things you've developed is also using a hazy underwater renders that I've had a look at. You've made an atmosphere shader. And on top of that, you've been working on a number of other little cool tips and also some very, I guess you could say, famous or infamous Blender themes. Can you tell me more about this?
Last year I made the strawberry theme, and so I recolored it for the banana theme.
Oh man.
Beware of using it. It will make all of your renders bluer because of
The bright
the
yellow
colors. But it's a very fun theme. If you want your Blender to look pastel yellow or pastel pink, you can download the strawberry or banana theme.
That's excellent. And you have some very excellent tips.
Yes, I like to experiment with doing weird things with few nodes, like the SSGI and the underwater haze. Oh, that's a photo I took on the plane.
Yeah, I was about to say. Okay, another things that I've noticed is you've also mentioned a little tip for some very quick and easy SSGI, which is a technique used by a number of different solutions for Eevee screen space reflections. And another thing,
that is. Sorry,
and
that's what the SSGI add-on and stuff do. But I just simplified it a lot so people can easily understand it without downloading a separate Blender build.
Oh wow. So we're going to get back to this tweet later, but the last tweet that I saw, there was a while back. I remember when I was starting this project maybe 8-10 months ago. You had shared with me a technique for coherent distance with painterly effects, which I think is down below. You did this quite a while back. This is this tweet here.
Yeah.
So I remember talking with you the other day, and I was very impressed with just the way your brain worked. But I wanted to ask you, how do you come up with these technical aspects? Seems like with these very obscure pieces of node magic, I guess you could say, where you can have a noise texture at the same scale up close to the camera, then the same scale further away from the camera. How did you come up with this? What is your thought process?
Well, how I came up with that specifically was by watching the YouTube video of size coherent noise and trying to recreate it. And I stumbled upon that. For all of the other weird tips and stuff, I guess I just think of it randomly. I test it out, and if it works, then it's great. And sometimes it doesn't work, obviously.
So I suppose there's a process of trial and error, I guess.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So here, the cover art that we have of this particular day today is actually of these bricks, which I thought were very impressive. But on top of that, these bricks are actually not really geometry to some degree. They're a parallax shader. So can you tell me a bit more about what is a parallax shader in its essence, so that we take appreciation of your add-on, of your technique?
Well, when you normally want to make a surface in 3D look like something in real life, you can add a texture to it, which is like coloring it in with a marker in real life. You color a piece of paper with a marker, and it's a flat picture of the bricks, for example. It doesn't have depth. So what the other way to add detail is by really displacing the mesh, which is like carving bricks out of a clay block,
Which
and
is a
then
lot of
coloring it in with a
topology, right?
marker.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of mesh detail in order to use this displacement. The third option is to stack a lot of pieces of paper on top of each other, which is still less geometry, but it's a little hard to deal with it sometimes. It is what Ben's Eevee displacement trick uses. What a parallax shader does is it simulates all of the stacking of the pieces of paper in the shader, so you can just apply it to any mesh.
Oh wow. Okay. So let's see if we can take a look at this in action. So in the chat, I shared a link to the product on Blender Market. It's about $10, and it's a pretty good one. But in this case, this comes with a beta version. So I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between your first iteration and the beta version at the moment? And
Well,
also, do you have any plans?
Yes, the first version of PLX uses standard parallax occlusion mapping. It just marches the ray into the surface at set intervals, and it smooths them out by interpolating the texture the way normal parallax occlusion mapping does. It was still slightly better than the competition, but by removing the shrinking at edges that parallax shaders like Simon Thomas's NodeKit parallax uses, and it had the most number of layers by default out of any shader.
Wow.
What PLX 2.0 beta does is it uses a new technique where after marching the initial layers, it creates like sub layers in between those layers at a quadratic rate. So I'll send the tweet so to my comparison.
All right. Yeah, I'd like to see this. I think. Let me just quickly go back to your tweet.
It was
for some of these.
quite
There
a
we go.
long time ago.
Was this the 8
No,
layer?
not that one.
This was October
Might have
20.
been before November. Before November 2020.
So this would have
So
been
really far down.
really far down.
Yeah.
Was it this one? No, the fake self-reflection. Wow.
Oh yeah, that's a normal trick. But I'll just send the link to tweet and the channel. Here
Sure.
you go.
Okay, let me load it up. 1 second. Old smoothing and new smoothing. So this is something that I thought was probably what brings you out as an excellent parallax solution. Is this.
Yes, both of these have 32 layers, but old smoothing is parallax PLX 1.0 or 1.1, and new smoothing is the 2.0 beta.
That's a huge difference between the two versions. Yeah, because that's one of the traditional methods. Is the problems with parallax is when you have a low angle, you can start to tell that the parallax is it's an illusion. So when you're playing a game and they're using a parallax which doesn't contain any type of smoothing of any kind or any type of tessellation, then you start to see that it is not really that effective. It is only good from like top down or 45-degree angles almost. But with your parallax, you can lower the camera quite a bit before you even start to notice that it is parallax, which is extremely interesting. So, JC, I have a question for you. In what use case would I be using parallax instead of tessellated geometry specifically? When do you think it would be most useful?
If you have, for example, a brick wall or a tiled floor or any surface that isn't normally, that any flat surface that isn't, I guess, then it's probably a good just have a bit more displacement, because you don't really need to have so much geometry. If it's already a geometry heavy scene, you don't need even more geometry.
Makes sense. So it's adding in detail, especially with realistic concepts, into flat surfaces, or even, do you think this could work on a cylinder? For example, tree trunks of some kind?
There is a small issue at the edges, which isn't solvable by any means that I know of, but you can try it out.
I will try that out.
It will add the parallax offset the right way. It just won't have the edge silhouettes that you would get with a mesh.
Okay. So I want
So
to...
in the future, the relatively near future, there will be a PLX add-on that will make the texture loading system a lot better, and you can see Drace using it now.
Wow, trying to. I was about to ask you, I mean, this is a bit of a mystery to me right now at the moment, but I know I have had some look in the back channels, and this is in development that you plan to release in the future. Can't wait. Would this be the PLX 3.0, more or less?
I'm not sure. I haven't even finished the plans I had for 2.0, so maybe this would be 2.0.
Okay. New and renewed.
And the price will increase to $25 for the add-on, or $15 for just the shader. So get it now at $10 while you can.
Because you maintain your access. Okay, makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, good. So what can we take a closer look at this add-on a little bit? I've noticed Eevee has taken a connection here as well.
Yes, this is Eevee is the one who made the add-on.
Oh, wow. So it creates a new node here in the add menu, basically. And with this node, we have the options to load a single image. Would this be considered a height map? Is this what you
Yes.
load? Okay.
Yes, this is the height map.
So I load the height map, And with it, I have the image settings, number of parallax steps, the UV map strength, mid-level, minimum, maximum, and the scale and center. I guess these are for your options here. So after that, what would I need to do to make it work, more or less?
Well, you load your height map, and then you plug it into your image textures for your PBR setup, and put them in the principled shader.
Okay.
It's that simple. The PLX node replaces the texture coordinate node, for example.
Oh wow, okay. And after that, I'm switching to cycles, correct? Because this is the one that has displacement? Or would this work in Eevee?
It's not displacing the mesh. It works in both Eevee and cycles.
Oh wow, okay. So I'm using Blender 3.4. Okay, now I can start to see. So if I bring up this, whoa, okay.
Yeah, the strength is to the power of 4, so you can tune in really fine values or really large values.
Okay, I'm gonna make it nice and strong so it's very exaggerated. And I can choose, whoops.
Yes, it has to recompile the shader when you change the number of steps.
Okay. I'll keep it on 5. So you have a number of smoothing steps, which is what you showed here in the tweet earlier.
Yes, every smoothing step doubles the amount of sublayers and makes it so when you look at it straight on, it will not have as much noise. Turn the smoothing steps to 1 to show how it works.
Okay, let it recompile. Okay, I see. It's not quite as pretty. Put it back to 5. Parallax steps to 10, the default, just to see. But it's already looking pretty good already. That's a huge amount of detail. If I press play, it's running at 30 frames a second. I can tumble around the viewport and it's working perfectly fine. So that's the power of parallax. And this is just one polygon. Alright, so it's worth the money in that regard.
2 tries.
Or 2 tries, yes. It's made out of 2 triangles. Okay, let's try.
So now, also, the PLX includes a normal calculation, so you don't need a normal map. You can just plug the normal from the displacement map right into the principled shader.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. Alright, let's see if I can find another height map. Just give me a moment. I'm going to choose a rock texture. Patterns.
The one 3 right and 3 down looks pretty cool.
This one here?
Yeah,
79?
down. But
so
the height,
yep,
yeah,
okay.
that one.
Okay, cool. And let me just load up the texture as well. The diffuse. And I probably should tone down the height of the strength.
Turn it to non-color data. So from sRGB to non-color data. Like you would a regular displacement map.
Gotcha. Which would be usually floats, right?
Yes.
See how we got the strength. Whoa. It's almost like real-time displacement.
Yes, plug the normal in and it'll look a lot better.
Okay, I think I have it here.
Oh, you do already. Okay.
So what does the Z and the clipping button do?
Well, if you preview the Z, then it will show the depth.
Okay.
So if you want to use it for another shader, you can. If you're into making more complex shaders using PLX, the Z depth is how deep it is, obviously.
And you can tune it to a bit.
Yes.
I probably should use a more blurry version of this image as a height map.
No, it's okay. Wait, that's probably a bump map extracted from a texture rather than displacement map photo scanned. So pick a photo scanned image.
I'll try this rock and mortar one. There we go. That's much better. So rock and mortar. We'll min and max it again. Go back to the P principled, and whoa, look at that. So there.
It's still sRGB.
Oh, it's still sRGB. I wish Blender could auto-detect what an image space is in. Oh, that's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Obviously, I probably need to redo the UV maps,
Yes,
correct?
it's based on UVs, and it only works when the UVs are scaled properly to be a square. But otherwise, it's perfectly fine. It works on any UV unwrapped surface. Esoteric applications. There are many weird things you could do with it. Like if I scroll down even farther, there I made a water droplet shader that uses PLX.
Wow. Yeah, there are many use cases. For example, a stone path. You could use it for a rock materials or dirt, or pieces of mulch in the ground underneath the grass without too much of an extra cost. You could use it for bark as well, or like sticks in the ground as well. Underneath a forest, pine needles. You could use it for a carpet inside of a building when you don't want to calculate the fur. You could have like this carpet material with the depth map, which will give you a more convincing type of carpet, subtle but very good, without too much of a performance hit. You could also use it for, I guess you could this be animated with a deformable mesh?
I'm pretty sure it will work as long as the UVs are right. Then it will work fine.
Then you
On
could
any
use,
mesh.
oh, that's excellent. Then you could use actual wool. You could create like an actual knitted fabric and wool onside your character's mesh. There was another use case that I recommended your PLX to. A person was using it was a single mesh eyeball, but where the cornea was, they used the parallax material on another layer. And so they had the cornea glass or the cornea transparent material. And on that same cornea, they used parallax inverted inside to create a fake refraction with the pupil. So in this case, they created a super performant eye that looked very realistic using your parallax inside Blender. I remember that. I thought that was a very interesting use of that case as well. With a single mesh, no real refraction, and it looked absolutely incredible. That's another use you could use it for. Wow, look at this. So here's the ripple effect with the rocks. Okay, excellent. So with your PLX and the future of the project and things like that, I guess we can talk a little bit about what are your current activities? What are your current projects at the moment, other than working with this add-on? What other art projects do you do in your free time?
Well, I'm learning about how digital color works and how humans see color to make interesting tools like color correction tools. You can show the boost mode that I made.
Yes. Let me load that. I have to go into my library, check out my scenes, go into the composites, not geometry nodes. C for composites. Compositor boost. Alright, so I'm going to switch to the compositor layout. And I have an image here. So let me just load up the image, go to the viewer. So this is the original image that we have here, as you can see. I'll tell you what, let's split it. So this is the render view. And let me just go to the render or composite image. Oh, that's the render result. I have to hit it.
You have to,
there we go.
yeah.
So this is the original image. If we take a look at the lumiscopes, it's at this certain level and things like that. We've got the colors that taper out to a certain point. I mean, I've already color balanced this image relatively well, but just to give the example, if we use the boost node that you're working with, it's currently very exaggerated. If we switch it to like level 2, so here is the other version. What is the difference between using the saturation node built inside is basically it clips the colors values to the point where we start losing the original colors. So even at a saturation level of 2, the reds are extremely red, the blues are extremely blue, and everything that has a high luminance, well, now they're just saturated purples, and we lost a lot of the original colors that we had earlier. So using your boost node, it's working with 8-bit, but the same saturation that we have here is now very much intact compared to the original image. So here we have the saturated version and the not so saturated version together. If we go to the character here, this is subtle, but you can tell that the colors are starting to be more saturated, but they're not fighting for attention and they're not clipping. So what's your plan with this type of technique? What do you plan to do with this in the future?
When the viewport compositor comes out, I hope to make color tools that you can just turn your brain off and slide the values around and get good looking results every time.
Oh, that sounds like a dream to me. Yeah, because using the hue and saturation node that's built in, to get really nice color, you're going to have to use a ton of tuning and hard work with your color balancing and boost the channels and do this and do that and chain a whole bunch of different nodes to get the same type of result that you already have created. Well, that's exciting. All right, cool. So my one of my last questions is you are quite young from what I understand, and you're still in your studies, but you've got a huge trajectory or a huge experience with your node. You know what you're doing. You're very efficient with your experimentation. You're implementing tool sets that are available for the community. You've created new assets or new concepts that you really want to share, and you want to make your life better with the colors, and colors are really important to you, and the same with like detail and accuracy. Your attention to detail is very important, and you also are very helpful as an artist. So I wanted to ask you, and you started back in the 2.72 days, which is quite a while ago when it comes to the Blender trajectory. Not a lot of people have started since then, most of them a lot later. But I know that you're moving forward with your art and your work, so I wanted to ask you, what kind of advice or experience or lessons would you have for someone who's starting out, who would want to compete with the node vendor, who wants to get into shaders, get into the compositing or color? What type of tips, what type of advice would you give? What has helped you over the years?
Well, back in the day, I can't believe I'm saying back in the day. But back in the day, there were very little tutorials or resources for learning shaders. The common practice was to mix diffuse shader and glossy shader with just the mix shader, no Fresnel or anything. This is well before the principled shader came out in 2.8. And that's why Prism Glass was so exciting to me, because it was quite an advanced glass shader at a time where no one knew anything about shaders. So I learned by throwing my head at the wall and messing around, and it kind of worked. Newer shader artists like Nugget have learned much quicker because of the availability of shader tutorial resources. But at a certain point, you just gotta keep trying new things and learning what nodes do and how they work together. and that will help you come up with new ideas.
So get your hands dirty and get the job done.
Yeah, and you have to enjoy it. You have to be passionate about what can I do with nodes now?
You have to enjoy the process, not just the final destination.
Yes.
Oh wow,
As for vector displacement, eventually I'm gonna make a more advanced vector displacement tutorial that goes beyond what Aaron's tutorial does.
that's good. Whoa, look at this. This is absolutely incredible. Man, for environment design, parallax is a godsend. Running at 25 frames per second. Well, that's the frame cap. Let me move this up to no cap. 60 frames a second. This is on the GTX 1060. Absolutely incredible.
Oh, also, you don't need good hardware to do shader nodes. You don't need good hardware to start using Blender. When I started using Blender in 2.72, I was using 2011 Mac Mini, and I still managed to start learning and get where I am today.
That's cool. All right,
The hardware is more like the limiter for the speed that you have to wait for stuff to finish, but it's not limiting functionality in any way.
All right. So Geep has a question for you. He asked, is Blender your primary method of creating images? If not, what other tools are interesting to you?
Well, Blender is my primary method of creating images, and I also use Photoshop and After Effects and Illustrator and stuff because there are other useful tools. I would recommend not starting to get into the Adobe ecosystem, but I've gotten very used to it. Oh, that's something I retweeted. That's not something I made.
Oh, there's the strawberry theme. I found it. Oh, that's beautiful. Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to where you take all of this and where you're going to go. So with that, I guess we can start wrapping it up. And we got some art from Slink. And I wanted to ask you, JC, would you like to take a look at these people's art? Oh, cool. Good. If I ask, what is your troubleshooting philosophy? This is an excellent question. His context is, a person as a nodist in a program has often run into this, but pretty much everyone I've talked to has a different method. So what would be your troubleshooting philosophy?
Well, I used to save quite often, but now I don't save as frequently. For new shader projects, I just try stuff, and if it doesn't work, I try something else or I move on, and maybe it will come to me in a dream or while I'm bored at work or something. For very sensitive, buggy shaders, like when I was making PLX 2 beta with the dithering and the smoothing, any tiny change seems to completely break the smoothing, so I didn't save as often, and anytime it kind of broke, I reverted the file. It's probably better to save backups than to do that, but that's just the way that I do it.
Well, so you're gonna have like a threshold that you bounce off from and then go back to and start from a different branch, similar to...
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's very similar to GitFlow to some degree. I've also noticed you have a lot of incoming refraction techniques that you worked with to create post-processing with Eevee.
Oh no, that was just trend following experiment when Leia, as usual, found the refraction buffer method. I just tried making a small rendering engine with that. It's not something that will ever be used. Except maybe in the viewport compositor, I'll just try it again, but it's not something that will ever be used.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, this viewport compositor to me, I feel like is going to be one of the biggest revolutions in Blender ever since Eevee came out in 2.8. I think it's even almost bigger than geometry nodes, in my opinion, to some degree. So Slink, JC, if you'd like to, let's co-host this together. We got some art by Plebes, which we have some textures. We also have this this model that Slink has been working with in the Polyhaven community, I assume, with their competition. And Shmuel is not here, so I guess we'll hold off his piece for now. But Slink, would you like to tell me a little bit about this watering can and the work that you do? If you're still here.
It is a watering can.
It's a watering can.
Surprising, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made it for the Polyhaven competition, yeah. Where you can like make models under which theme was it? Under the sheet. Yes. Or the shield. The shield. Which is like, yeah. It's like the second model I made for it now. Yeah, the
wheelbarrow is incredible.
wheelbarrow thingy. Yeah, that was the first one. And the second one was like the watering can.
It was a watering can. So how many assets do you plan to make?
No.
A few.
As long as I'm not burned out, I think I'm gonna make them.
Alright, talking of burnout, JC, with all your work and experimentation or the things that you've been doing with other clients potentially, have you ever experienced burnout before?
Yes, a lot.
A lot.
And when I do, my burnout for music production tends to be over, so I switch to that until I'm finished with the burnout for 3DR, and then I switch back.
Oh, wow, that's a clever trick. Wow, okay. So, that's an interesting technique. So let me get this straight. So, how long does it usually take for you to get burnt out, and what are the conditions to it?
Well, I get burned out if I'm really forced to work on stuff a lot. If I'm working on it by myself, then the burnout takes longer, maybe a month or two. And if I'm really forced to work on a project constantly and spend a lot of time, I might get burnt out right after the project is over.
Yeah, that happens to me too often. But I like your concept of switching a project up or switching the creative medium for a moment. That's quite clever. Alright, so I visited your website just briefly and I wanted to find your project of PLX. Is this only available in Blender Market?
It's only, I might release it in other places, but up until now, I haven't thought it was worthy to release anywhere else.
Well, it's definitely worthy. Definitely. And you should also link it on your website. I know it's a Google's website.
Yeah, if you go down, if you click on still renders, these are the latest things that I put on the portfolio 2 to 3 years ago. So I really need to revamp my portfolio soon.
Still looking very good though. Your lighting is quite nice. Oh, you also did a black hole, nice.
Yes, that black hole was part of my color theory class final project. No, that wasn't. It was my Design 100 class final project.
This Christmas tree render is very cool.
That was for the Red Blender Discord Secret Santa 2018, I think.
That's cool. All right. So, Plebes, are you here at the moment? I guess not. Ah, there he is. So here in the Discord server, he's been sharing some rock textures that he's been working with geometry nodes and shaders. I feel like this project here that you're doing right now, please, would benefit a lot from the parallax. Especially if you're looking for performance on render time. Probably.
I was muted. Yeah, I'm here.
And I was taking a closer look at the moss that you've been making, and I wanted to ask, how are these rocks being generated? Are they actual geometry? Are you working mostly in shaders or textures? What's your technique here?
I'm working on a geometry node setup to draw walls with curves and then have it some kind of nature stonish setup, which is also some kind of mosaic-ish setup. And as far as the shaders, it's just bump and micro displacement.
I like it though. The specular on this moss looks like it's almost like algae. But it looks good. If you have like a, when it comes to moss, when you have a very strong anisotropic, it may make it a bit more convincing with the normals. If you have the normals based on just the micro displacement, it may look more like algae or lichen. So if you add in an anisotropicity, if you can, it will help make it look more like moss. That's a little tip.
I gave it a tiny bit subsurface where the moss mask
That'll
is,
help.
and I probably should turn the anisotropy is one of the few values I haven't looked at.
Yeah, anisotropy is good for your, which is something you did as well, JC, right? You created a fake anisotropy with Eevee because it's not inherently built inside Eevee, correct?
I created real anisotropy
Real?
in Eevee. Yes,
Okay.
it properly reflects everything anisotropically, unlike, for example, a fake anisotropic hair shader that might just add a highlight, which my hair shader is not. But my anisotropy dithers the normal in the direction of the tangent. So it's real anisotropic reflections.
Wait, I need to see this. This is the tweet that you shared it?
Yes.
Wow. Vertical and horizontal. So yeah, so anisotropy.
You can rotate it just like the principal shader.
Oh, that's beautiful. So
I lost the file. I'll have to remake it.
Oh no, I was about to say, I was like, where can I find this? I use Eevee a lot with my rendering workflows and pipelines, so sometimes having something like this would be super useful. So yeah, well, please, if you're going to use Eevee, this is the technique that you would use, which you're going to have to wait a moment to figure it out. But you're using, you mentioned you're using a white noise blur in the normal direction of the tangent.
Yes.
That's very cool. Yeah, because with moss, anisotropy is kind of like you have a lot of small strands, and because you have so many strands, the angle of the specular that hits it bounces slightly different based on the direction or the angle of the particles, I guess you could say, the little particles. So because moss is made of tiny little plants, a bit like hair, the specular is going to bounce in kind of a streaked pattern instead of a flat surface. So the little leaves might be a little bit shiny, but because there's so many of them, the light that's hitting the little leaves penetrates through and passes to the one leaf behind it, passes to the leaf behind it, and they all bounce a slightly different angle of the specular, making it look stretched. And this is what makes your moss look a little less like algae and more like, or less like a lichen, or more like a moss. In cycles, it's super easy because it's built inside the principal shader. But with Eevee, we're going to have to use another technique, which I'm glad to hear is possible. All right. Well, thank you, Slink. Thank you, Plebes. And thank you very much, JC, for your time today and for sharing your art, sharing your skills, showing us the secret project of your PLX 2.1A or your next version. I'm really excited to see it come out soon. I'm very happy to see that Iyad had a hand in this project as well. He's here in the chat. And I just wanted to say you're doing an excellent job with what you do. You have a very special, iterative and experimental mind, and I'm very happy to see you succeed in that. I'm also I'm looking forward to see where your studies take you and where you take the community with your work. So thanks for that. Pancakes has mentioned he's made a similar technique for anastropathy on his technique. Slink says no, thank you for hosting.
It seems there were earlier questions that I missed.
Oh yeah, I missed them too. Let me just double check.
I think you got them all.
There's a new voice chat system sometimes I miss.
Oh no, I'm kind of drunk. I have a lovely relationship with nodes. How can you understand the concept of nodes? I follow tutorials. Oh, I think I indirectly answered this. Just mess around with the nodes and you'll figure out what they do and how they work together.
Some
tutorials can only explain so much.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding is like, especially with geometry nodes, sometimes you just need to get your hands dirty, use the node and see what it does. Plug it into things and see what happens. Kind of a kinetic way of learning. Oh, that's valid. One of the early guests, Pers. I think did we talk with Pers earlier? Yes, we did. A couple of weeks back, I think, or last week.
Yeah, I think it was last week.
Yeah, with Killen. He was explaining his technique, which is very similar as well, where he's connecting his nodes, has a very kinetic way of testing and feeling how it works, feeling how the math works. Pancakes says, who is this Pers guy? You know who he is. Well, check it out in the last episode. If you guys...
Sorry, are you still live?
Yes, I'm about to tie it up. Let me just do a quick little plug, and then we can have a little after party. So for those of you who's still here, which I'm very thankful for you to be here, these events will be continuing every Friday, same time, same place. And next week, we have another special guest, which I will be announcing later this week. If you'd like to support what we do here, or if you'd like to be a part of this project as a special guest, feel free to get in touch with me or visit my website at trinomedia.com to find out more information about what I do for the B4 Artist community and for this particular project. And if you really feel like it and you want to see higher quality productions or more information or more assets and things for you, you can always support me or Iyad or any one of us artists here with Ko-Fi or Patreon. Remember, every purchase goes a long way, every monthly subscription is highly appreciated, and every comment and like is extremely motivating. So thank you everyone once again, and I will see you next week, same time, same place, here on Twitch or YouTube or here in the Discord live. So without more to say, thanks again JC, and I will see you guys next week.